Hi, I'm Dr. Johnny Drain, and my talk at Confectionery Live 2023 is titled Leading Change in Chocolate: Why Alternative Ingredients like Cocoa-Free Chocolate are Vital to Building Long-Lasting Sustainability in Confectionery. My name is Dr. Johnny Drain. I'm co-founder and CTO of a company called WNWN Food Labs. I am, by background, a material scientist, but I've been working for about a decade now in fermentation, in hospitality, setting up R&D teams in restaurants, doing ingredients innovation, and using fermentation really as a tool to unlock not only deliciousness, but also sustainability. Some of the people I've worked with in the past have been Noma, Nordic Food Lab, which is a fancy restaurant in Copenhagen, and people in London, where I'm based now, like Mr. Lion. So today I'm going to talk about alternative ingredients, and specifically my passion in this space is around cocoa-free chocolate. And we can get to the whys and the wherefores of why you might even want to create a cocoa-free chocolate. And then we'll talk about some of the other alternatives and why they're important with respect to building long-lasting sustainability in confection. But whilst in recent years there's been a huge spotlight on the issues in, for example, dairy milk or industrialized meat production, issues in chocolate supply chain and cocoa supply chains have not really had that spotlight in them. So I'll just start by sharing some of these issues. And although we think of chocolate as being a very sweet treat, it really is a disaster for the planet and some of the people on the planet who are involved in its production. So if we look, then 2/3 of the world's cocoa is produced in just two countries, the Ivory Coast and Ghana. And in those two countries, it has been documented that there's about 1.5 million child slaves tending, harvesting cocoa pods. In addition, there's also adult slavery. When we look at how cocoa is produced in those areas, what we see is there's massive deforestation. And firstly, that causes a loss of biodiversity. But secondly, that is exacerbating climate change. So carbon is being emitted and it's no longer being absorbed by those forested areas. And when we look at those emission statistics for chocolate, what we see is that actually per kilo, there's 6 times more carbon emissions per kilo of chocolate than in dairy milk. And actually, the greenhouse gas emissions of a kilo of chocolate are very similar to a kilo of cheese or even pork or chicken. Additionally, lots of chocolate production has an outsized water usage as well, which is greater than that of pork. So chocolate, we think of it as being a sweet treat, but there are ethical and environmental issues that are hardwired into why mass market chocolate is as cheap as it is. These are issues that when we want to do something about. There are already lots of great people with initiatives trying to make the lives of cocoa farmers better and trying to mitigate deforestation and biodiversity loss that plays into climate change. But we believe we're doing something that's innovative and that can help and aid and be a pillar in that fight to make cocoa supply chains better. So lots of those cocoa farmers earn less than $1 a day. They're below the extreme poverty line. And the figures of how much a child laborer might be sold for in Ghana, that would be on average about $34 US. These problems are well documented. They are also documented and acknowledged by the large cocoa and chocolate companies, and actually even companies like Tony's Chocolonely, who initially their whole ethos or MO rather was slave-free chocolate. Even they have been found to have slave labor in their supply chains because of the sorts of people that they do business with. If we look at this deforestation, if you look in Ivory Coast, something like 80% of that rainforest cover has disappeared since the 1990s. And what this means really for chocolate and the future of chocolate, and therefore the future of confectionery, is that there's likely to be a global supply shortage of chocolate, and or that the price of chocolate will rocket. It will become a luxury. It will be something that is out of reach for many people. And this is exacerbated and then, as you saw, being fed into by issues of climate change. Now, it's bad enough that that's the case for chocolate, but these issues that we're seeing the idea of a shortage, the idea of rocketing prices, are set to be seen amongst other foods that are critical in confectionery. So we can look at vanilla, another kind of key pillar of confectionery. We can look at coffee. And again, time and time again, we are seeing similar patterns, deforestation, issues with climate change, issues with labor violations. Now, these problems have been happening for 20, 30, 40 years in terms of the environmental things. That slave labor has been a hardwired part of big chocolate, as we call it, for long before that. But in recent years, as we've seen with, alternative milks and alternative proteins, there has been trends and shifts in consumer taste. So, 53% of adults in Britain who are or willing to limit meat consumption to combat climate change. And there's been a 55% increase in vegetarian food orders in major US food delivery platforms. And the knock-on of that consumer change is that retailers, grocers are starting to adapt what they sell. And in terms of food companies are reformulating and trying to get rid of, problematic ingredients and incorporate more sustainable ingredients in their place. And so already we're seeing some of the very biggest names in the corner of confectionery that we work in, adapting and bringing products to market. So Ben and Jerry's have recently collaborated with Chinese Chocolate Only, and last year Mars released this cocoa chocolate bar in collaboration with Perfect Day, which is a dairy milk or a milk chocolate bar, but which is free of animals. So Perfect Day are a synthetic biology company. They create milk proteins, but without the animal. So we're seeing movements from the very biggest players in these markets. Other trends that are connected to some of these within confectionery, well, we're seeing, moves towards no gluten, no palm oil. Palm oil is a huge thing in confectionery, and specifically chocolate. And we're also seeing formulations that are, have no added sugar or are suitable for keto diets, so low carbohydrates there. We're also seeing more and more confectionery products to be made with, functional ingredients, whether that's vitamins, whether that's CBD, L-theanine, some of these products, or just simply high in protein. My background working with restaurants, I used to do a lot of work around circularity and try to make bar and restaurant spaces circular using industrial waste streams or byproducts. And so we're already seeing some people in the confectionery market and the ready-to-eat market work with these side streams. And certainly that was actually one of the founding principles behind WNWN Food Labs. WNWN, the acronym originally stood for Waste Not, Want Not. In the confectionery space, a couple of companies that I'm a big fan of, Vanilla Vida, who are making real vanilla, but they have found a way to amplify the amount of vanillin produced per vanilla bean by using essentially a kind of curing or aging process. So they take real vanilla and they bring it into their lab or their workshop and they cure it, much like bananas used to be ripened in big warehouses. So the idea is there that, actually the vanillin in lots of vanilla beans is only a small portion. And if you can increase that percentage, then you can, use less vanilla and offer a value add for food manufacturers. Alternatively, we're already seeing a few alternative coffee products on the market. There's a company called Atomo. There's also a company called Compound. So they are making coffee without coffee. So using ingredients like chicory and dandelion and roasting those and producing this alternative. So I'll talk a little bit about what we're doing at WNWN Food Labs. We are operating in this cocoa-free chocolate space. I'll talk about what we're doing, why we're doing it. So as we've established at the start, chocolate seems like a very sweet, innocent treat, but there are grave ethical and environmental consequences of the way that most of the world's chocolate is produced at the minute. Now, of course, we love cocoa, we love chocolate, we want there to be more chocolate, but we want there to be more chocolate that is made and produced in ethical, sustainable ways. When we look at chocolate trends, It's clear that consumers love chocolate. That is not going to change. By 2030 globally, it's predicted to be about a $300 billion a year industry with about 6% year-on-year growth. But as it stands, there is no current available alternative to regular chocolate. And so we identified this as a very big market opportunity. We think it could be worth $40 billion by the year 2030. So we've made a alternative to chocolate, which has 80% fewer greenhouse gases, that doesn't involve deforestation in the way it's produced, because we're working with delicious ingredients, but also sustainable and scalable ingredients. So, for example, we work with cereals and legumes. There's no point us replacing one problematic product if we're going to create a product that is delicious but isn't sustainable. And so because of that, we're also choosing to work with no palm. I think there is good palm out there, but there's certainly the consumer understanding of that is very unnuanced. And certainly I think it's true to say that most of the world's palm currently is produced in unethical, unsustainable ways. So we're working without palm. We're working with sustainable, widely available legumes and cereals. And when you make chocolate, of course, you grow cocoa beans, and you take those cocoa beans and you ferment them, and then you roast them, and then you melange them and mix them with sugar. We do exactly the same thing, except we start with ingredients that aren't cocoa beans. So our hero ingredients are things like barley, has a rich tradition of being used as food and drink stuff. I grew up in the UK, whiskey and beer, and also carob, which essentially lines the entire coast of the Mediterranean. So these are some of the ingredients that we're choosing to work with, and that have actually some of the great antioxidant properties that people turn to chocolate to include in their diet, so polyphenols, that sort of thing. So what we're making is a suite of ingredients that we want to function as a one-to-one substitute for all chocolate applications. So whether you use milk or dark, whether you're making ice creams or cookies or pain au chocolat or candy bars, our win-win milk and dark chocolates can be used in these applications. And we've already stress tested a bunch of these. So if you look at these pictures, the Reese's cup, the picture on the right of your screen, that's ours. Similarly, that's a Magnum ice cream, and that's our enrobed equivalent of a Magnum. We've made pain au chocolats. We made our take on a Rolo at the bottom, and we've made things like chocolate ice cream. And so it melts like chocolate, has similar temper curves and crystallization properties. It has the same sort of freeze-bake properties, so we can make a pain au chocolat, freeze it, and then bake it. And of course, the reason why people choose to eat chocolate is because of this sense of indulgence, this emotional connection that many people have with chocolate. One of my learning experiences of running this company, we're about 2 years old now, is that suddenly when you start talking to people about what you do, and I say, well, we have a chocolate company, their faces light up, and everybody has a story or a connection about what their favorite chocolate bar is, or some birthday party, or something that reminds them of a parent or a loved one or a child. And chocolate is this magical food stuff that sort of brings people out of their shells and actually lets people, or seems to make people, open up in a wonderful way that was sort of new to me before I started working with chocolate. So last year we became the world's first company to sell a cocoa-free chocolate. We did a number of limited edition product releases, from just regular chocolate bars to a sort of gianduja hazelnut chocolate to our take on a dime bar that we called a wine bar. And the feedback so far is that consumers, by and large, absolutely love it, with many saying that they wouldn't be able to tell the difference. So very quickly, we've demonstrated that it is possible to make this alternative, and that there is a consumer demand for it, and that when consumers try it and eat it, they really, really enjoy it. So we're launching a challenger brand. So we will be launching our own brand into sort of retailers, predominantly in the UK. But first and foremost, the intention is to actually be an ingredients brand. So we will be selling into confectionery companies and food companies. And the idea is that we can recreate the world's favorite snacks in the same way that people are doing currently with, low sugar formulations, or, high protein formulations, or allergy-free formulations. There's companies making peanut butter that's free of peanut butters, that's free of allergy. We intend to do that, but for chocolate. And so if you have a Snickers bar, but it might have our cocoa-free chocolate, or it might have a hybrid of real cocoa chocolate and our chocolate. And what that would facilitate would be companies that make these products being able to stamp on the outside, fit now 50% fewer greenhouse gases, or now, 60% lower water footprint. So that's the value add that we're adding. And thus far, lots of these large companies and small ones are very interested in this work and interested in this opportunity, because they're hearing from their consumers, from their customers, that is something that they want to see. A very quick recap of what that technology is. We identify ingredients that we want to work with. They have to be whole ingredients. They have to be sustainable, widely available. Obviously, price fundamentally will determine whether we're a successful business or not, probably. So we have to work with ingredients that are relatively inexpensive. And as I said before, just like in real chocolate, we sort of ferment and then we create flavor by post-processing. And then we feed our products into conventional chocolate manufacturing equipment, and then we produce these varieties of applications that you've seen thereafter. We're scaling up. So we started, incorporated the company in 2021, and we're now starting to co-manufacture on the ton scale. A little bit of info about what's sort of in the nuts and bolts of what we're doing. There are alternative companies who are making cocoa-free chocolate. I'll talk about them, I think, in the next slide. But from our side, we're not using any GMO. We're not using any synthetic biology, and that's allowed us to move quickly. And those ingredients that we work with, as I've said, they're widely available and inexpensive. Also choosing to work with ingredients that have secure supply chains. We've seen in the last 2 years this idea of supply chain shock when there is geopolitical instability. When we look at a lot of these products that we've been talking about, cocoa, coffee, vanilla, they are typically produced in parts of the world where there is more geopolitical instability. And so increasingly companies are looking to make sure that their supply chains are really resilient. So this is another kind of value add of the alternative ingredient space. In terms of who else is working in this landscape, obviously we have the incumbents, so whatever, Cadbury's, Mars, etc. More recently, companies like Tony's Chocolonely, who are not faultless, but I think are certainly doing a good job of raising awareness and shining a spotlight on the horrors of conventional cocoa and chocolate. We also have a company called Planet A Foods. They're based in Germany, who are also doing a cocoa-free chocolate, quite similar to us. There's another company on the west coast of America called Voyage Foods. They've led with this peanut butter, or this allergen-free peanut butter spread. But they're also doing a chocolate. And then there's another company called Cali Cultured, also in California. And they're using synthetic biology, so stem cells. They are using genetically modified organisms to create this, but their product would actually be called chocolate, whereas of course what we're doing doesn't have any cocoa in it, so we can't call it chocolate. Just finishing off here, so as I've alluded to, there are lots of other ingredients in the confectionery space that have problematic supply chains, and they're of course interesting to us. If we look at coffee, vanilla, tea combined, that's about an $850 billion annual global market. It's worth pointing out that the science that underpins why coffee tastes like coffee and why vanilla tastes like vanilla, they are different, but I like to call them the science of delicious brown stuff. There are some connections between them, and if you look, a lot of those things, coffee, for example, is also fermented. Vanilla is not quite fermented, but there's an enzymatic process that produces that vanillin, which is what that company Vanilla Vida have become experts in. So we're interested in these products. So we plan to produce a suite of these sorts of alternatives that can feed into our customers' products as well. So I think that's the end. I can take questions now, but thank you very much for taking time to listen to me.
Thank you so much, Johnny, for delivering that presentation. So could you just tell us why you chose to talk about this topic in particular?
Absolutely. So I think my background, sustainability has been a key passion of my and focus of my work in recent years. And, it's the reason why we set up this company. I think the reason why it's important, we use this platform to, that the first step of bringing cocoa-free chocolate market really is an education step. And it's because most people, even people working in, pastry and desserts and confectionery, just don't know. They're just not aware of how damaging chocolate is from the ethical side or from the environmental side. So I think our first step really is to raise awareness. So that's why I like talking about it.
That's fantastic. And you mentioned in your presentation very briefly, consumers are exploring alternative diets. Have you found that these kinds of consumers are more willing to try cocoa-free chocolate? What have you noticed about the kind of people who are eating your product?
So far, we've identified a few different bases. So firstly, all of our products that we put out have been vegan. We're not using milk powder, which you normally use to make milk chocolate. So there's definitely a huge interest rather from the vegan community, which is beautiful and amazing. Also, we're seeing people that might not be vegans, but are kind of ethical consumers. So people who've taken a stand maybe about trying to remove palm oil from their diet, which is basically very, very difficult to do because palm is so pervasive in cosmetics and food these days. That's another pillar. I guess also people, what we've really realized since we've started talking and shouting about what we're doing, there's a small but significant group of people who actually can't eat chocolate. So lots of people get migraines, or it brings them out in spots, for example. And we've had people from every corner of the earth literally slide into our DMs and our inbox saying, where have you been? I've been looking for you all my life. I love chocolate, but I can't eat it. It gives me migraines, or it makes my face swell. So there are these people for whom they might not have been able to eat chocolate for a long time, who are also interested. But I suppose these are the initial groups of people that we plan to market to. But what you're seeing is, this kind of flexitarian movement. People are realizing now increasingly that the global food supply chains are riddled with problems, and definitely people now are much more aware of industrialized meat production and dairy production, dairy milk production. And so people are not necessarily wholesale changing, they're not being fully vegan or fully vegetarian, but they're from meal to meal or shopping trip to shopping trip, making these more ethically informed decisions. And so we want to appeal to those sorts of people. And fundamentally, we think that it should not be, no one should have to sacrifice anything. So we want these products to taste exactly the same as their favorite old chocolate bar, just that if they have the opportunity to pick a bar that has, lower greenhouse gas emissions, no slave labor, then we want to be there and provide that alternative to those people who want to support that.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting to hear from you. I suppose the added bonus of offering a product that, as you say, people who previously could not have enjoyed chocolate now can. I'm interested, what ingredients did you look into? What were you looking for more specifically? And why did you settle on the ingredients you're now using?
Yeah, so I actually had this sort of eureka moment that really led to this company about 5 or 6 years ago. I was boiling a pan of potatoes, and I just leant over and I don't know why, but I smelled the steam. It smelled like chocolate. And so I had this little light bulb. I was like, oh, maybe there's something in potato skins that's also in chocolate. And so that's what, got me, started me down that rabbit hole of like, what's in potatoes, what's in cocoa. Now, we ended up not using potato at all, but, we have this flavor profile of chocolate. We have this very simple word, chocolate. But actually, when you think of what different flavor profiles chocolate can have, if you compare a 90% dark to a 35% milk, they're really different things. They have completely different flavors. And actually, there's lots of people that like one but don't like the other, or there's people that like dark chocolate but wouldn't touch a Cadbury's Dairy Milk bar. I like them all, and I think they're all valid. But it actually has a very broad spectrum of different flavor profiles. And what we're looking to do is find these ingredients where these precursors and flavor compounds are just kind of hidden, just as they are in cocoa. If you take a cocoa bean, you have to do a lot of work to get that chocolate flavor out of it. So we're just doing the same thing. And carob's a really interesting one, because if you look in the world of confectionery, if you grew up in like this, or if your parents were sort of hippies when you were growing up, they might have gone to like Whole Food shops and bought these, fake chocolate carob bars, and apparently they were really awful. So carob has been somewhat maligned in the sense that it's been attempted to be used as a chocolate alternative before, but probably, as far as I understand, with quite bad results. But we're saying actually carob potentially is a superfood, has incredible antioxidant profiles, so lots of polyphenols, those sorts of things which are good for you. And also it grows in what we call brackish soils, so soils that have often quite a high salt content. So it might grow where it's difficult to grow other crops. So, and it's very resilient to kind of drought and stuff like this. So you have this sort of superfood that's been attempted to be for people to make interesting, delicious things with, but hasn't quite popped off. So we want to kind of celebrate carob along with these other amazing ingredients that we're working with. We also, maybe it's worth adding, we work with, don't have any cocoa butter, we don't have any palm, but we're working with other vegetable oils. And one of our commitments is that we want to try to support the purchase of products that grow in cocoa producing areas. So for example, we're working with products that also grow in West Africa, where there are lots of cocoa farms. So, if we are very successful and have some effect on the cocoa industry, then we are making sure that there is money and economic opportunities in those areas where cocoa is currently grown.
Yeah, I think that is a really good point you made about consumers, and I can definitely speak from experience here, not knowing everything that goes into a chocolate bar, or like you said, not being able to identify all the different flavor profiles. So just finally, I wonder, is the overall aim for you to not be seen necessarily as an alternative product, but for it to become the norm with consumers, and for someone to look at a shelf and not think, oh, that's alternative, I don't know if it'll taste as good. Is that the aim?
Absolutely. And I think the confectionery space as a whole, if you walk into a supermarket, there is a section where it's chocolate, but next to the chocolate section is a section with other, like, candies and confectionaries, and nobody's going to the non-chocolate section and going like, oh, this is rubbish, it doesn't contain chocolate. It's just a different type of sweet, indulgent, delicious treat. And I suppose, what I would love for us to do and to create is a new category of product where, maybe we're using sort of recipes or that are familiar from chocolate bars, but that are their own thing, and where people are just going, well, you know what, today I fancy this rather than the chocolate version of that. And that people aren't thinking, oh, I'm missing out on chocolate, or I'm making a sacrifice. That's what we don't want people to do, because I think if people feel like that, they're doing that, making a sacrifice, then this change, this won't be sticky, and we won't have the sort of impact that we want. So to create a new category of product where it's delicious and it fills that sort of emotional, that gap, that why people reach for like sweet, delicious things, a slice of cake, a chocolate bar, and it fills that, but it does so just in a different way with slightly different ingredients.
Yeah, absolutely. I hear that. Well, thank you so much, Johnny, for a really insightful presentation, for answering all my questions. If anyone has any further questions, please do reach out to Johnny on the platform. So thanks again.
Thanks a lot. Bye bye.